All right, good morning, everybody. Can you see this?
Yep.
Okay, so today we'll be talking about Ultra Engine 0.9.5. It's very nearly ready. There's still, like, the implementation is basically done, but it needs some more testing. A few, like, small issues came up, but it's all, like, really, really small things. I've got a list of, like, 9 things left that I need to address, but they're all very small things. I'm going to be doing taxes this weekend, but Monday I'll pick it back up, and I think this will get I'll get knocked out very quickly. Now the goals for this update, number one is to add compatibility with AMD GPUs. We had a poll in the forum a few weeks ago, and the response was that compatibility with AMD GPUs was a big priority, and also the vegetation system is a big priority. But like AMD was number one, and I kind of agreed with that, and so that's getting addressed very quickly. This update adds multi-sample anti-aliasing, which is something we've been missing, and it's very nice to have. And I believe this will also result in improved stability for your projects, especially with some of those hard to reproduce problems. Now you'll notice like what's not a goal in this update is to make the performance faster, because like we're already like so far ahead on performance that I would actually be willing to accept like a small reduction in performance if it meant we got these goals. But we'll talk about that. So AMD compatibility. This was our main issue, but there were some others, and we talked about this in depth a few weeks ago about the shader invocation groups and what was needed to fix that. And so this is in on the screen on the right. That's in 0.9.4, which is the build that you guys have right now. And then on the left, this is the 0.9.5, which is what I have that has not been released yet, but will be very soon. Multi-sample anti-aliasing is very, very cool. This is very high quality anti-aliasing. And what's different about this in Ultra and LEDWorks is in Ultra, the multiple samples are kept all the way through the shader post-processing pipeline. So as all post-processing effects are applied, they're being applied to the high quality like multi-sampled pixels. And so you get these really nice edges on effects like SSAO and other things. In LEDWorks, if you did this, you would get like little pixels that were out of place, and so you would get like a bright pixel in a dark area and a dark pixel, along the edges. So this just gives you a much nicer image quality. Now let's talk about performance. I said that in order to improve compatibility with AMD cards and give us better stability, I would be willing to accept a small decrease in performance because our performance is already so good. I have to tell you that in 0.9.5, the performance is not the same as 0.9.4. I know, we've been saying 10 times faster, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to change some of my marketing materials because 0.9.5, it's a great update, but it's not going to be 10 times faster anymore. It's going to be more like 25 times faster. So in the instances in the
Oh,
was that dramatic? Are you shocked?
I was joking that that you were gonna 10x or 10x gains already.
Yeah. Okay, so you're mildly shocked.
uh,
Um,
no, it's good news. It's really good. That's
so
awesome.
so in let's see, this in our 4 benchmarks that we've been using are actually super useful because I can test the new build and the old build and other engines very, very easily and get like a very clear idea of each bottleneck that can occur in the rendering pipeline. So with our instance rendering test, Unity was getting something like less than 50 frames per second. I forget what it was, but it was very low. Ultra 0.9.4 was getting on the AMD Radeon 6600. It gets about 2400 frames per second, which is very, very good. But Ultra 0.9.5 more than doubles that, so it's almost 6,000 frames per second with that same test. With lighting, again, like Ultra 0.9.4, which you have right now, is much, much faster than LEDWorks and Unity, but Ultra 0.9.5 just blows it away, more than twice as fast. Animation, this is actually where we saw the biggest gains. Same story. So we're seeing across all these different stress tests, we're seeing the same story. It's like about twice or sometimes more as fast. And here's everything in one slide. So, like I said, it's almost done. It's almost there. I just have like a list of like 9 things, and they're all very small. There's not like some big thing I have left to do. They're just like things where I can cross off like a few of them every day. So that'll be out next week. I know I said it was going to be like right at the end of the month, and I never know for sure how long things will take, but it's gone really. The results are really, really good. I think you're really gonna like this update. Any questions?
No.
What will I do with the rest of my life?
What do you mean?
Now that it's completely changed.
Oh.
The double.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, our performance is already so good that that wasn't really a goal, but it just kind of happened. I don't know what I did, guys.
What do you plan to do with all that performance?
More zombies.
What are you planning, or what are the 9 things you want to add into the update?
Oh, it's just real. It's like really obscure things. Like I haven't tested Tessellation yet. I need to at least like just test it and make sure that it works. I want to add an option to do a post processing step without a shader. So like in the post processing chain, if you don't have a shader defined, the engine should just do a blit operation. It'll just copy from the previous texture to the new texture. There were some complications because of MSAA. This uses a different texture format, and it uses different. Okay, so it works with Texel fetch, but it doesn't work with the texture sampling command in GLSL in the shader language, and so I had to rewrite some of the shaders. I mean, rewrite. I basically just wrote like a wrapper function that converted float texture coordinates to integers, and so there was a few like little things with the post processing system that I had to adjust. There's a few things like, for example, okay, if you're using MSAA, then you're rendering to a texture always, because it has to render to an MSAA texture. And so like if you have like 2D rendering on top of 3D, I need to add something in there so that it copies the contents of the previous render into the G buffer for the next render. Because otherwise it'll just appear black because the previous some other like pretty obscure things like that. I just want to make sure everything's very you guys have a very smooth update. So I mean, it should just be seamless on your part, except that now you've got MSAA and it works on AMD cards.
Do you know anything about the prefabs? I know I asked.
I know I I have not. This has taken all my time. I haven't made any progress there. I think prefabs is something that I can, once this is out, then prefabs is something that I can resume work on right away.
This sounds nice.
Yeah.
Very good. Was there many changes to the shader structure? So will most of our custom shaders still work the way they are?
The shaders will need some adjustment. Like I changed the way like some of the it's just the input. The inputs changed a little bit.
Okay.
But like the shader code itself is the same.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. I thought there'd be a few changes.
Yeah.
Did you get VR to work yet? Or you
Yeah.
still-
Yes, I did VR last week. It only took me it didn't take me very long to test that out. Everything was fine. I actually noticed I think the latency is quite a bit lower in this test. The easiest way to test latency is just to hold the controller straight in front of you at like arm's length, and then just turn your whole body and keep it like right in front of you in the same position relative to your head. And if you have high latency, then you'll see it kind of shaking around. If you have low latency, then it'll just look perfectly smooth. But I did notice, I think when you have higher frame rates, even if your frame rate is capped, like it always is when you're rendering to VR, I think that results in lower latency. So I think even if you're probably not concerned about rendering 6,000 frames per second unless you have a really nice monitor from the future. But where this does result in lower latency, so we can reasonably assume that the latency in the new update is going to be like 2.5 times less, whatever that works out to be.
You tried with the Vive or the Index, because the Index has high refresh rates.
I did it with a Vive, but I mean,
Yeah, so that's 90. I want to see what it does with 144 or something.
yeah, I mean the Vive is 90. I think it'll be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, people are using Unity for VR, and
Yeah, it's gross. I get sick. Especially when it comes to like decals, like their decal implementation, and it just bugs out, and you just see it's just like there's a game, I don't know what game it was. It was using Unity, and it just like how it did like decals, and like it didn't like VR for some reason. So yeah.
Yeah, the worst, I think probably like one of the worst VR games I played was like there was a Fallout VR game.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so terrible. The performance was so bad.
Yeah, that's the creation engine.
And then, of course, when you walk up to somebody, you put the gun right up on them, you pull the trigger, and it doesn't work. Bullet shoots off to the side.
Everything just works.
In Fallout or just in general?
Fallout 4, when I did Fallout 4 VR testing, and
I didn't get
rough.
it. Yeah, I didn't get out of you start in like a house or something, and I didn't even get out of it. The performance was just like so bad it was unplayable.
Well,
It's still terrible, even on a 4090.
Yeah.
To be fair, this engines have not made for VR, so this is a pretty old engine, I think, which Bethesda are using for other games like Fallout and Skyrim.
Well, maybe it's time for them to upgrade.
You should show them Ultra.
Once it's further along for sure.
Or just go ahead and try Starfield, and you'll see they're not planning on upgrading anything.
Yeah. So I think the path ahead is very, very clear because we have Ultra has this tremendous advantage, and there's a tremendous need for it, and I just need to make sure that those things connect, and the way to do that is to just focus on the making sure that the features we need are there, and the workflow is good, the editor is good, the documentation is good. I think Leadworks had all the same challenges to adoption, but Leadworks didn't have a carrot. Leadworks was just like, well, why would somebody use Leadworks? Well, some people like using it. It's kind of nice. Oh, it's got this feature that's kind of cool, this feature that's kind of cool. But there was no really compelling reason you could tell people that they had to use it in one short sentence. With Ultra, there is a compelling reason, and so I think adoption is just going to be completely based on my ability to make the software a good experience for people. And so that's why I'm not really worried about, making a flashy demo or, making things that are, trying to teach beginners how to write games. I'm more concerned about just your usage experience. Because I think that's just giving you the best experience possible is going to be is the way to go. So that's all I got for this week.
I got a question though.
Mm-hmm.
I have made a Ultra Engine run on the Stereo Beamer, so it works really fine. The only engine that compares to it is Unity, but Unity needs to be done a lot. But I wanted to make some kind of particle effects or materials, and I don't know how to program a texture or like a material so that it can be placed on a plane, and it will. You can translate it from a shader toy or something like that. But there's like 2 files, and I don't know what to do. Are there any documentation for this or any resources I can read on?
Well, currently the particle system is one of the things that's that I decided to defer until after the initial release. So the remaining major features are prefabs, vegetation system, particles, and decals. And at the rate things are going, I would, if you can wait a little bit longer, then you'll get your particle system. If you want to do something immediately, you could use sprites, but it's going to be actually sprites the performance will probably be just fine, actually, considering how fast the engine renders. So that's what if you need it immediately, I would use sprites.
Okay, there was a shader in Leadworks for animated sprites that has one frame of the texture and jump to the next frame, to the next tile.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to program something like this. Can you give me a tip on how to do this? Because I think in Leadworks it used to be pretty easy to make a shader, but now I don't know.
Yeah.
This is something else than a particle system. I'm talking about shaders right now. So particle system, that's okay. This is it will take a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I would like to program this myself because I need this urgently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So shaders in Leadworks were fairly simple because all of the lighting was done as a post-processing step because it was a deferred renderer. In Ultra, we're using a forward plus renderer, which is very nice because the performance is faster, and we also don't have all of the problems with transparency that deferred renderers have. We can have as many layers of transparent lit transparent surfaces as we want. Particles can even have lighting on them, which you probably saw this. They did this a lot in the newer Doom games. But because of that, the shaders in Ultra are pretty complicated. They usually involve 10 or 20 include files. The easiest way to do this, to make a custom shader, is to just copy and paste either the unlit or the PBR frag file, and then just change that to work however you want. For particles, I don't know. It depends on how you want them to blend, but and then you need a shader family. So in Leadworks, each material defined all the shaders that it would need. They were all defined within the material. And one of the problems with that is if your shader design changes at all, you have to go back and change all your materials. In Ultra, we use a shader family file, which is it's just a JSON file, and they're located in the shaders folder, and it uses the extension FAM, family. And if you open that up, it'll show you all the different shaders that are used depending on the combination of what's currently being drawn. So you need a custom shader family, which is it'll probably be pretty easy to figure out. And then I would copy and paste either the unlit or pbr.frag files and use that as your shader, as your fragment shader, and work off of that.
Okay. So there's unlit frag. I might open this.
I would start with I would start with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I open the file, it will be corrupted. Is there any way, like any program where?
Wait, are you opening the SPV, the SPV file?
Yeah.
That's the compiled Spire V file. It's a compiled shader binary. So the shader sources are located in source/shaders.
Okay.
And a few people have already done.
Yeah. Thank you for that start.
Okay.
I will take a look at this. Yeah, thank you for the information. It was very useful already.
Okay, yeah, for sure. Let us know if you have any problems, and we'll definitely try to help you on the forum or on Discord.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Another question: Have you tried? I've seen you have tried point clouds. Is it possible to render point clouds with 5 to 10 million points in it? Because that would be really cool. Because I have a similar project going on.
Like a single mesh rendered with points with 5 to 10 million not polygons but vertices.
Individual vertices that are not connected, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It'll handle that very easily.
Yeah. And can they be colored? Like you have colorized point clouds?
We have vertex colors, so it should work just fine. Someone else was actually. Go ahead.
Okay. So you need to convert this to if you have a point cloud, you need to make your own conversion in Blender or something. Convert it to vertex colors.
Well, I don't think that the GLTF format supports points, does it? And the OBJ format doesn't. Like, you would have to just have them in some kind of file and load it up. You would probably need some kind of custom file, or else. Well, actually, I mean, if you just have a mesh, you could just export it and then create a new mesh in memory and copy all the vertices, and just when you create the new mesh, just set it to be using points instead of triangles. There's an optional parameter.
Okay. What was the file type that you used for the point clouds? I don't remember exactly.
I don't remember, but what I'm saying is, like, if you have a mesh, if you have just like any GLTF or OBJ file or something, you probably want GLTF because OBJ would take a long time to load. You can just do is create a new model in memory, and then add a mesh to it, and when you add a mesh, specify that it should use points instead of triangles, and then just for every vertex in your triangle mesh that you loaded, just add a vertex into the new one, and just copy them over, and then you've got then you'll have a point mesh.
Okay. RJ said you need custom loader for point clouds mostly. Masquerade for point mesh is in the chat. Just need to make sure it was done right. Which chat? You mean on the network forums? In Discord.
Chat, just need to make sure it was done right in Discord. Oh, I didn't notice the chat here. Okay, hold on. Oh, cool.
That's something I'm working on right now. Yeah.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, that looks really cool.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the biggest. I want to read what RJ said. I guess he doesn't have a microphone.
It's in CPP help. I think he just posted it.
Okay. All right.
All right, that was it for me. I have no more questions.
Okay.
And thank you.
Well, one thing Stash did bring up is the like animated like textures that's still in the to-do list that easily have animated textures and
Okay.
shader
So,
variables.
you're talking about basically animated texture coordinates. So like moving texture coordinates. There's also frames of different.
Right.
There's also like frames. That's something else I'm thinking about. There's actually so
You mentioned that you brought this up last week. I don't know. I just thought it'll help him like do what he needs to do because he was asking about animated textures, and I think since now I'm not the only one asking for this. I think there should be more.
There's also so these are two separate things really. Like in one case we're just like scrolling a texture, and in another one we're changing the current frame. And in the renderer we have an option for texture array textures, which I've been using more lately because that's actually how I fixed those compatibility issues with AMD was the array textures. And those work. It's like a 3D texture, but with a 3D texture, the bitmaps get compressed along the width and the height and the depth. So like if you have a 64 by 64 by 64 3D texture, your next bitmap is going to be 32 by 32 by 32. Whereas if you have an array texture that's 64 by 64 and then 64 layers deep, it will still have the next level down will still be 64 layers, but now they'll be 32 by 32. The next bitmap down will be 32 by 32, but there'll still be 64 of them. Array textures, when you use the texture z coordinate to define which layer you're pulling pixels from when you do a texture lookup. But unlike 3D textures, array textures, when you specify that z coordinate, it's just like 0, 1, 2, 3, it doesn't do, if you do like 0.5, it doesn't interpolate between two layers. So it's either one layer or the next layer, which I think that makes them ideal for, that makes them really ideal for skinning. Like if you have 4 different versions of a texture of a material, right, then that's a really nice way to pack it all into a single image. That's very cool. And it doesn't require any like special treating of that in like a GLTF file because the model doesn't really know anything about it. However,
no, I was gonna say like that's also like on my wish list too, is to have multiple skins for models. This way, not all the barrels will be the same and all that.
Yeah, I actually think that's a nicer implementation. I think that's a nicer solution than the GLTF. How GLTF, because GLTF has an extension for this, but it uses a separate texture file. If we used array textures, then we can pack them all into a single image, and that prevents us from breaking the shader batch because it's faster if we. Well, actually, I guess with the bindless textures, it doesn't really matter. But anyways, it's it seems like a nice solution. The only consideration is that if it's either one layer or the next layer or the next layer. It doesn't do like an interpolation. It doesn't do like a quad linear lookup. So like, which a 3D texture will do. So if you have like like let's say you have like a water animation and you want to smoothly transition between those, then the shader would need to do like two different texture lookups for two different layers, which isn't that hard to do. It's just like some separate logic that has to be in there. So that's what I'm thinking at this point. I did look into this, and that seems like a pretty nice solution. Wow, a lot of people showed up. I guess they're ready to be shocked.
Yeah. No, that's great. And will there be like a tool for making the layers? Because you did post like code years ago about how to write a program that packs everything into layers and everything. But would there just be like a utility tool or an editor extension that does this for me, so I don't have to write the application myself?
Right. Yeah, I think an editor extension is the nicest way to go, because then if there's it can be modified if needed.
Right.
The code that I wrote that does 3D. That actually did a 3D texture, and so as a result, the one issue with that, I don't know if it's really an issue or not, but that means like, okay, let's say you've got 64 by 64 by 64. Well, you've got 64 by 64 images, and then let's say there's 64 of them. Okay, when you get further away, when you go down to the next map level, that means there'll only be 32 frames. When you get further away, that means there'll only be 16 frames that it's interpolating between. I mean, that probably doesn't matter, but anyway, so what I'm thinking is it might be so that we might be able to just use array textures all the time, even when they're not needed, like in the default PBR shader. I need to test and make sure there's no like downside to that, but I think it'll probably give us the exact same performance, and it'll just give us that extra flexibility, so we don't have to have an extra shader just, for that special case when animation or different skins are used. That's what I'm thinking at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, because I know like in Source, when you went to compile like, let's say like a texture that used multiple frames, you would just like in the source file, you just go _001 002, and then you would just tell VTeX to compile all those TGA files into one texture, and then they'll all each have its own frame. So I think we should do something like that for the extension.
Oh, one more thing I also looked into. DDS files actually do support array textures, so we don't have to have any kind of special file format. We can just store that in DDS files, which I greatly prefer when we can use like just standard file formats.
Well, you have the water normal as a DDS texture, and that animates. So.
Yeah, that one's a 3D texture. It's not an array texture, but yeah.
All right, cool. But does the other texture, does Basis and KTX and all that support it too?
What was the second one you said?
KTX, if we're still using that. KTX, K is in kite, T is in Tom.
KTX. Yeah, I don't even think about KTX. My conclusion on KTX is that it's just Basis and DDS glued together. Like, yeah, it's not, I don't really see it doesn't have any tool support. I don't really see any advantage for it. It's just like, they just kind of crammed everything into one file format, and it seems kind of pointless. Basis, I mean, in theory, in the future, it seems like it will be a good idea, but we're kind of far away, and I don't want to like steer everything in one direction because of what I think might happen in a year. For one and that's really just for supporting like Meta, like Oculus headsets.
Right. Mm.
So for the people who weren't here, who missed it, I'll show you really quickly. This is the performance difference between Ultra 0.9.4. Right here is what you have. This is what the next update does. So it's like about 2.5 times faster. That's the shocking update. I did promise you would be shocked.
We are. It's pretty cool.
You have to update the website.
Yeah. 10 times is not enough.
25 time. Eat that, Unity.
10x programmers aren't good enough here.
Yeah, I think we're so far ahead on performance that, I mean, I wasn't even trying to do that, but it just happened. I think yeah, it's just a matter now of making a good user experience. I think is what it all comes down to. Trash can useful. I don't plan to add a built-in code editor, because I think Visual Studio Code is, with the Lua debugger extension, is much better than what we had in LEDWorks. The debugger in that is so good. Like, you can hover over a variable and it'll show you the value, and yeah, it's very good.
So next week, you said?
Yeah, I got to do taxes this weekend, and then but it's going very fast. Yeah, like every day I'm making like major progress. Add a menu option to open up the project. What do you mean? Like an open dialogue? Yeah, that's a pretty good idea, actually. Wait, to open up the project. Okay, so you mean open the Visual Studio Code project from the editor.
Yeah, that could easily be an extension. You could just, instead of clicking on the batch, you could just go like project and then like open VS Code or something. That could be an extension if that's what they want.
Yeah, I also had the idea of in the project. Let's see.
I think the problem is, or one of the big problems is, that many people think an engine is just the editor, and yeah.
I would like to have a little like like the parentheses, the brackets, a little icon here, and then if you click that, then it opens up the project in like whatever language it is. It'll open up either Visual Studio or VS Code. It would be nice to have another little button here that does that.
Well, I was thinking of under the game tab. Anyone can write this extension. You could just like open a code editor, and then it would check if there's an SLN or check if there's an SLN file, and if there is an SLN file, open that. Otherwise, it'll open the folder and code.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too.
Yeah. The only thing is that when we add C#, I don't know. I think it's still an SLN file, so you might need to write something to the ultra.json file to tell like what. Actually, I think you are done. Actually, instead of doing that, you just read the ultra.json file, because I think the template says like C++ or game or.
Yeah.
something. So
No,
we can just do,
someone else came to be shocked.
yeah. So
Who
we
is
can do
this?
that.
Synchro Mesh.
Let me look into that 1 second. Okay.
All right. Any more questions?
What kind of, I mean, it's just a general question. What kind of transparency ordering are you using? I played a bit in the last days with OpenGL and find out that the order from transparent objects is really important. And there are different solutions to, order or not order the objects that the transparency is correct.
They're all ordered back to front
Okay.
on a per
So
object basis.
Also no order independent transparency.
No. Yeah, there's some interesting techniques you can get into with like multiple depth buffers and even like on a ordering each triangle even, but I think you can do that with a geometry shader maybe, but like for general use for and performance, like just simple back to front on a per object basis has worked very well for us.
Yeah, I read some NVIDIA papers. It's not that easy, to be honest, this order independent transparency or the implementation of it.
Yeah. Let's see. There should be an interaction kit. Can you add a video showing how to make a basis in VR? Yeah, but I can't right now. Like, I mean, my take on like on making more more documentation and more tutorial type stuff, especially. My take on that is like let's get the core engine flawless first, and then we'll have a better foundation to build on. Can SynchroMesh help make an Ultra Game Guru Max? I don't know. I think that's up to SynchroMesh.
And also after the engine, the editor needs to have the same TLC treatment because there's a lot of weird things still happening. The face selection keeps breaking, apparently, and the undo and reduce doesn't work properly.
Early access. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I mean when I say like, making sure the workflow is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Ultra is in a good situation right now, and it's going to keep getting better.
Yeah, I think the issue is that people expect it to be production ready, and it's kind of not at this point.
Well, we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Is it possible to use Ultra with Notepad++? Yeah, there's no reason you wouldn't be able to. It's just, I mean, you'd still have to switch back to like Visual Studio to compile it, though. Unless, I don't know if there's a way to set up Notepad++ with the VS compiler. There probably is.
Another thing would be is to get VS Code to work with C++. I know it's an inferior experience, but it might help in the long run when porting to multiple platforms because I don't like Xcode, and it would be nice to have a multi-plat solution for compiling C++ and C# projects.
Yeah, I've actually, if you try Ultra App Kit on Linux, that's what it uses for. It uses VS Code for C compiling.
Right.
So I have done it before. The debugging and the auto completion aren't that great. Like it works. It's probably the best thing there is for for Linux. I haven't ever tried CLion. I started it and then I saw it still needed a make file, and then I just stopped at that point because I didn't see what the point of it was.
I really liked Code. I really liked Code Light, but I couldn't get the debugger to work, and I couldn't like figure it out. Like even on like simple C++ projects, I couldn't get it to work for some reason.
Yeah, we used in LeadWorks we used Code Blocks on Linux, and it's terrible.
It was a feature-rich IDE, but it worked. But it was just so bloated and outdated that it just eventually broke.
No, yeah, lots of features, bad implementation.
Yeah. I wonder if that actually improved or has just been abandoned, because it's open source, so anyone can just jump in and just take over.
Yeah, because time is infinite and labor is
It's been 10 years. I mean, look how much the Linux ecosystem changed in like 10 years. So who knows?
Well, let me know your findings. I'm not counting on Code Blocks being any better than it was. Actually, it's not the worst IDE I've ever used. The worst IDE I've ever used is Eclipse. That thing was a horror show. Oh man. Trying to do that with Android, that was like, it would just crash like half the time, and it was so awful.
Yeah, I haven't had the privilege of compiling for Android. I could never. It's just a lot of things to install and everything, and my brain just turned off. And
I think it's a great idea to learn coding actually, because it's not that supportive like Visual Studio, where it's IntelliSense saying, yeah, you could do this as next if you press tab, then yeah, it will create it. So when I started to learn programming, my teacher was saying that we should start with an editor, not with an IDE, to learn actually the thing behind, and not to get help or something else.
And you guys learned with it? You used Eclipse?
We used Eclipse, yes.
Yeah, and we were doing it like right when, like the month that Android started supporting C++ code, because at first it only supported like JavaScript or Java or something. And it was like a big deal. It was like, oh, native code on your Android. This is a novel concept. And so we were, I mean, it was like, it's probably gotten a lot better since then, but like when we were doing it, it was like absolutely bleeding edge, and it was a bad experience for me. I don't mind Xcode so much. I think it's I think it's okay, but I understand some people don't like it. Let's see with Arduino.
I just don't like the Apple ecosystem of developing everything. It's like harder than it has to be.
Yeah, it can. Oh yeah, it can be.
So,
I mean, it's kind of interesting. So today you get all this stuff like CMake, Premake, and all these things, and like 5 or 6 years before, or 7 years, you don't want to have this stuff, and you was happy with just a programming language and Visual Studio or something else, and
I use Premake all the time. I have it set up to work on Ultra Engine. It's pretty nifty.
Yeah, I started programming with like some pretty bare bones system. Like most of what I learned was in Blitz, which is basically just Notepad with some output. So from the compiler. So I like things that are like kind of bare bones. And then my first programming language was actually Dark Basic, like the old Dark Basic with the full screen IDE. They must have done that thing in they must have written it in DirectX. It must have been like a code editor written in DirectX, because it always had to go into full screen like a game. Who's traumatized.
I think starting with actually programming a game is you will have a pretty hard time, because the most guides or tutorials you found, they expect that you have at least some basic foundation what you can do with programming language and whatnot.
Yeah, I kind of wonder like about people coming into like graphics programming now. Like I am like at the time I was born, like I kind of like my development as a programmer kind of followed the progress of graphics as they got more and more advanced. But like yeah, I kind of wonder like what it would look like for somebody who's just like starting from scratch right now.
For graphics or what?
The documents or a what's that?
If you want to start with graphics, I think if you want to start programming with a graphics API, OpenGL would be the best solution for you. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, but I just mean like okay, so like I learned the old like fixed function pipeline before shaders existed, and I remember when shaders started being a thing. And that made, everything, a lot more complicated. So it's like, I sort of learned as the technology progressed, but somebody coming into it now, like they've got like the full, yeah, I guess you're right. If you could actually recreate that. Like if you went through like the simpler version of OpenGL and then just added, more and more features as you were learning, you could do that. RJ, I'll see about creating up a mesh with points. I think it should be pretty simple, but I'll just post that in the forum today.
A quick question for you, Josh. Custom render paths, is that possible?
Like a rendering hook, like Klepto is doing.
Klepto and I touched on it briefly on Discord. I'm not sure if you saw. I was trying to visualize normals, tangents, and bitangents on a mesh, and I wanted to use the geometry shader just to emit a line segment. But the problem I had was I couldn't emit the base mesh as a triangle. You can't have two output primitives. So I just thought, maybe it was possible with another render pass where you'd have your default shaders for your mesh, just rendering all the triangles with their textures. And then I could add another pass to the same mesh, but with the geometry shader enabled that just output a couple of line segments for the normals. I was just more curious than anything, because I know Klepto said he wanted a custom render pass or something. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, okay, that's funny because he actually asked me about that yesterday or the day before, and then you mentioned that. But I've got an idea. Tell me what you think. What if a camera, you can set a shader family for a camera, and that overrides whatever shader family the mesh is using. And then what you could do is, like, if you want to show normals, if you want to display normals on a model, what you could do is set up a second camera, use the render layers feature to make sure that only that model is visible to the camera. And then you set a custom shader family for that camera, and that overrides so that the mesh, that second render that's drawn to that camera, it's being... it will use whatever shaders that you specify, and then you can take that the camera's output and then draw that onto a sprite and display it on top of your scene.
Yeah,
maybe something like that.
Case that sounds like it'll work in my case. Be interesting what Klepto thinks if it works in his case. Yeah, sounds like it'll work.
My impression with I think what he wants to use it for is for like depth only rendering, which you can do with a light, but he might be doing some other weird stuff with it. He's always doing crazy advanced things.
Yeah, he
but
is,
we can try that out if you think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Try it out and see how it goes.
Let's see, stacked cameras started doing a year or two, and that's basically that's another you could that's something you could call it. All right, any other questions?
Not for me, no.
Nope.
So Ultra 0.9.5. We were 10 times faster. Now we're going to be 25 times faster. And as well as, besides that, it'll be compatible with AMD. We have multi-sample anti-aliasing, and I believe this will lead to improved stability. And it's nearly ready. So I expect that we'll have that out next week.
Awesome. Can't wait. I'm kind of like waiting for this update to do anything.
The big question is everyone shocked?
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I'm shocked too.
Okay, good. All right. Thank you all for coming. Let me stop the video now.